Yes. All right. There we go. So I'm going to keep an eye on people coming in here, like this person, Robert Dennis. There we go. Okay, welcome to Artists and Their Art in Peter White Public Library. My name is Marty Acketts. I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator for the library, and you probably all know that I see some very familiar names and phone numbers. Welcome to Peter White Public Library. I just have one group that I will thank for this, and that is the Friends of Peter White Public Library, who give me funds to do lots of different programs that I do here at the library, including Artists and Their Art. So always very thankful to the Friends of Peter White Public Library. And I'll just, I'm going to talk about a couple things that are upcoming for this coming month and early next month. And so one of the things that I will highlight for those of you that are interested is tomorrow night we have this weekend, if you're familiar with Marquette, we have the Hiawatha Music Festival. And so in celebration of that, tomorrow night we have a bluegrass throwdown concert here at the library, which means that we have a bunch of bluegrass musicians who are going to probably try to outdo each other on the banjo and other places. So I really encourage you to, it's always fun to watch these musicians get together because what they do is they get together like an hour and a half before and they'll say, oh, why don't we do this, this, and this? And somehow it all just comes together in these, and it's always such a fun time to watch. So that's the Bluegrass Throwdown tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. It is supposed to be outside on the Front Street steps. It does not look like the weather is going to cooperate with us tomorrow, but we'll make that decision tomorrow at about noon. If we are not on the Front Street steps, you can come down to the community room, and the concert will go on in the community room tomorrow night. So either way, there will be a concert tomorrow night. All right, so other things that are upcoming here. Okay, so other things that are upcoming next Monday, July 21st, we are going to be doing our dinner and a movie night. And the movie for Monday night, July 21st, starting at 5:30, is Anora, which won the Oscar for Best Picture, and Mikey Madison won the Oscar for Best Actress from that film. And that starts at 5:30. We will have tables set up. I will have popcorn, and you're more than welcome to bring your dinners, sit at the tables, enjoy this movie. But just be aware that Anora is R-rated, and it's a very hard R. So please be aware that there will be nobody under 18 years of age that will be admitted to that movie. Let's see, next week also, starting July 22nd, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we have poet Cindy Hunter Morgan, who is going to be doing a poetry and book arts workshop. There are still a couple spaces left in that workshop. If you are interested, you can go to pwpl.info and sign up for that. And then next week is going to be really busy. So we have Ramble Tamble, who's going to be doing a concert on the steps next Wednesday, July 23rd, 6:30. Then we have another Northwards in Music on Thursday, July 24th at 6:30 p.m. in the community room. The theme for that show is Golden Oldies, and they've asked me to be in it, so I guess I'm a golden oldie now. I don't know. My son would probably agree with that. Anyway, and then we have Karen Babine, who is a novelist who is going to be coming, and she just wrote a memoir called The Allure of Elsewhere, and it's about her trip across. She's newly divorced, and she travels across the United States to Nova Scotia to find out a little bit more about her family. So that one is going to be Tuesday, July 29th from 3 to 4 p.m. in the Shiras room. And then also the last thing that I'm going to highlight for you guys is we do have Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who just published a, thank you for letting people in, Ellen, while I'm distracted. We have Jocelyn Benson, Secretary Benson just released a memoir called The Purposeful Warrior. So she is going to be here on Thursday, July 31st from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. That is a ticketed event. You do not have to pay for the tickets for that event, but you do have to have a ticket. So the tickets are available at the circulation desk here at the library. If you want to come to that, I really encourage you to come in, pick up a ticket. The limit is 2 tickets per person. Show up to hear Secretary Benson read from her new memoir. I've read the book. It's really fantastic. She's a really great writer and really has had an interesting life story. So that is again Thursday, July 31st from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. in the community room. And our moderator that night is going to be Elizabeth Peterson, who used to work for TV6, is a good friend of mine. And she has gracefully, when I beg her, agreed to be my moderator that night. And she's fantastic. So lots of great things coming up. You can go to the Peter White Public Library events page to find out any more. But you are not here to hear me talk. You are here to hear Ellen talk. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Ellen Longsworth. You all know who she is. She's an art history professor from Emerita from Merrimack College, and she's also one of my best friends here. So I'm just going to turn things over to Ellen, and I'm going to mute myself. So here you go, Ellen.
Well, thank you very much, Marty, as always, for the lovely introduction and to keep us up to date on what's going on at the library, which is really quite an extraordinary place. Not only its books, but its culture. So here we are, Caravaggio 2. And let me move here to the first slide, which you might, if you were here with me for Caravaggio 1, recognize. And I'm beginning with the Contarelli Chapel with which we ended this first lecture talk on Caravaggio, just to remind you how exquisite and complicated, especially the 2 compositions on the larger walls are, the Calling of St. Matthew and the Martyrdom of St. Matthew. And this, their complication, I want you to notice for a particular reason, which will be coming up very soon. So here is a detail of the Calling of St. Matthew. And if you'll recall, for decades, if not longer than that, the fellow pointing to himself, or seemingly pointing to himself, was identified by art historians and non-art historians alike as St. Matthew, but actually it's the fellow at the end of the table who's not paying any attention at all, counting his coins, who is St. Matthew. And there's an audience here within the composition. And also here, there's more than an audience. It's sheer cacophony with the martyrdom of St. Matthew. Now, at about the same time that he was commissioned for this chapel, the Contarelli Chapel, he was also asked to create 2 paintings for the Cerasi Chapel in another very important church in Rome, Santa Maria del Popolo. And he was asked to create a crucifixion of St. Peter, a very rare event in the history of art, and a conversion of St. Paul, or Saul, on the left and right walls, as you can see. And in the center is a composition by another of the great artists of the time, Annibale Carracci. We start with the crucifixion of St. Peter. And as I said, it was a rarity to be represented, but for this work by Michelangelo for the Cappella Paolina in the Vatican. And I want you to notice all the spectators and all the hubbub around this potential crucifixion. The little guy digging the hole so the cross will easily fit upside down. Peter, as you might know, indicated that he absolutely had to be crucified upside down because he would not mimic his master being crucified right side up. So this is the model that clearly, once, as I've already said, previously said, Caravaggio was in Rome, he had access to, and he will take his ideas from Michelangelo with some regularity, but not so that he's not being innovative on his own. And so this is what he did with this Michelangelo St. Peter. He turns the cross around. St. Peter is looking away from anyone. In Michelangelo's version, St. Peter is looking directly out at us. As you can see, there are only three other figures. And the darkness that surrounds these figures, you already are aware of. It's called tenebrism, and it's a chiaroscuro of great dramatic effect that Caravaggio developed. And something I was noticing earlier today when I was looking at this slide yet again is the colors he's chosen are red and blue, primary colors, and then orange and green, complementary colors. Whether that was what he meant or not, that's what we have here. And otherwise, shades of whites and then the very dark background with no setting whatsoever, with the emphasis on the struggle that these three men are having raising this cross. And now to the conversion of St. Paul or Saul. There were two versions of both of these paintings. The crucifixion of St. Peter, the first version, has been lost, but we assume it looked perhaps something like this, the conversion of St. Paul or Saul, the first version, which was rejected by the persons paying for the decoration of this chapel, the Cherassi family. Now, I want to read, and I won't read the entirety of it, but I want to read the passage, part of the passage in the Acts that recounts this conversion of Saul or Paul. Chapter 9. And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired him letters to Damascus, to the synagogues, that if he found any of his way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise, and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. Now, clearly, Caravaggio knew these verses, and he creates here, as he did in the martyrdom of St. Matthew, a cacophony of figures. And one barely sees the figure of Christ in the upper right-hand corner, reaching down, supported by an angel. And Saul is not yet Paul, covering his face because of the intensity of the light. and the horse rears and the soldier approaches to protect him. But as I said, this was rejected. It's very like this, isn't it? Cacophonous. And it, in fact, was based upon a version by Raphael. The original painting for this tapestry has been long lost, but you get an idea here of not really cacophony, because it is, after all, Raphael with a good deal more order, sense of order, but it's not dissimilar altogether. But this is Caravaggio's conversion of St. Paul or Saul. The light shines down on Saul, who has been thrown from his horse. There's absolute silence.
Hey, Zay.
And you can see that his eyes are closed. He's blinded by the light. And it will be 3 days hence that he will be released by Ananias of this blindness. And then he will go and preach the word of the Lord. Besides Saul, as you can see, is just one other figure besides that magnificent horse, presumably, a companion of his who's now quieting the animal. There's one art historian who said, "Why such a large horse?" And he seems to have an idea about it, but I won't bore you with it. But it is rather unusual. However, if you look at the design of the composition, as Saul raises his arms, they connect, as it were, in a kind of oval circle with the rear of the horse and his nose, and it makes for the whole a complete and very comprehensive composition. It's an absolute masterpiece. And it has been compared in its silence, its introspection, with the ecstasy of St. Francis we saw last time, which raised a couple of eyebrows. I understood afterwards, why does St. Francis look the way he does? But it may have to do with the fact that he's so struck with having been met by God through the lighted sky that he collapses into the arms of this nearly naked angel. Not unlike this at all in terms of the activity of light and what it brings to bear upon the major figure. Okay. Then there is this figure. Love overcomes all. Amor vincit omnia. This is a work which raised a lot of eyebrows, as you might imagine. It was commissioned, however, by Cardinal Giustiniani, who will become a major patron of Caravaggio's. And you see here a quite nude and triumphant Cupid. The many objects at his feet have iconographic reasons for being there. And they have to do, it seems, with the interests of the patron, Giustiniani. But they do add a little bit of color, not a lot, but visual interest, and also helps to bring us a little closer in terms of our relationship to this figure. Needless to say, this is the most sexually obvious representation of Cupid in the history of art, as far as I know. Interestingly, though, it was influenced, its pose was influenced by this figure of Michelangelo's St. Bartholomew, which is to the right of the commanding Christ in the Last Judgment. And by the way, the cloth over Bartholomew's genitals was not originally there. It was added in the late 16th century, early 1600s, because people were just outdone by all the nudity that Michelangelo had created. But in any event, you note the displayed legs and the lack of modesty, I guess you could say. And then also, it seems that Caravaggio knew this figure of Michelangelo's, and it was created at about the same time he was working on the Julius tomb. But in any event, it is a victory figure, as you can see from the caption, and it also is posed in a similar fashion, but with a straight leg, a standing leg, a supporting leg. It's also a figura serpentinata, which is another subject. But in any event, we know that, once again, Caravaggio was looking at Michelangelo. One art historian has said that certainly, according to him, this image is a painting manifesto of a gay set, to which we're quite sure Caravaggio belonged. Whether his patron did or not, we have no idea. But it was highly prized. And if you look to the far right, do you see the crown, this golden crown? That's actual gold. And so this is how much, for instance, the patron thought about this work, that he would pay for that detail. Very expensive. A similar figure is the St. John the Baptist in the wilderness. And it, let me see, it was also commissioned by an important patron, let me see, Ciriaco Mattei, who was high up also in the church hierarchy. And the ram, of course, is associated with resurrection and the life, as it's an animal that is often sacrificed for such purposes. And what else should I say about this? That's all. Oh, here we go. I'd forgotten about this detail. In the lower left-hand corner is one of the ignudi or nude youths on Michelangelo's ceiling, which he painted before he executed the Last Judgment. And if you're interested, the image in the center that it helps to emphasize is Noah giving thanks for being saved, basically, and his family as well. But in any event, notice this, the nude youth there is very similar to St. John the Baptist, looking out and to the side, with some changes on the part of Caravaggio. But since we're back with this image, I should emphasize once again the dark background. And as we'll see, as Caravaggio's art continues until his untimely death in 1610, these dark backgrounds, this tenebrism, continues to be emphasized. Okay. Now, this is a wonderful painting in that it was created by a man an artist, obviously, who detested Caravaggio and was in competition with him for as long as they were both in Rome. So what Baglioni has intended here in this sacred and profane love is an attack on Caravaggio. It shows a winged male youth with an arrow. This is Eros in the lower right-hand corner. He's a god, as you know, associated with Aphrodite and profane love. And then on the other side is a devil, which seems to be screaming out at us with a caricature of Caravaggio's face. One interpretation of this painting is that it was understood, has been understood, as a visual accusation of sodomy against Caravaggio. And if he performed sodomy, we'd have had no idea. Baglioni is so accusing him of this, however. This at the time was very dangerous and serious because at the time it was considered a capital crime. Caravaggio probably was, according to another of my sources, heterosexual. I know he spent time, or we know he spent time with prostitutes, for instance, and he undoubtedly had relations with men as well. So, his Doubting Thomas was again commissioned by the future Cardinal Giustiniani. And here again, there is no setting. And it returns us, I think, to some of the earlier paintings of Caravaggio's, in that there are no faces here that he couldn't have known personally, no idealizations, and the detail in this work of the men's faces and that of the bowed head and face of Christ, as well as we can see it, is quite striking, as is the finger of St. Thomas being pointed and thrust by the hand of Christ, it looks like, directly into his wound. Very, what do you want to say? Physical, very physical. And unlike any other such Doubting Thomases that I'm sure you can think of, but it's Caravaggio after all. And the figures are very close to us. So it's as if we're there, part of that group. And speaking of the group, the three heads form a kind of crescent, don't they, around the head of Christ, or you could say that the four heads all together form a circle. And in that way, it's a quite unified composition. The sacrifice of Isaac is a work that was commissioned by an even more important figure, Maffeo Barberini, who will become Pope Urban VIII. And if you're interested, he paid for it in 4 segments. And what we have here is a scene from Genesis, early on, chapter 22. And you may be familiar with the story. There's a great Bob Dylan song, by the way, that I always think of when I look at this painting. Anyway, God has told Abraham to go up on a mount, take his son, take his knife, take a log for burning, and offer to God a sacrifice. And so Abraham does so. Takes him a couple of days to get to the mount. And as he's about to slit his son's throat, God stays his hand. And of course, that's what the angel is doing. That's quite obvious. And a ram has appeared and it will be the sacrificial lamb, as it were, instead. This is one of Caravaggio's few landscapes, by the way, and he uses, here's another term that you might be familiar with, atmospheric perspective, which means as we look into the distance, yes, it's quite dark, but the sky, as we look into the distance, into the sky, it's light and kind of bluish, grayish. That's atmospheric perspective. It's something that you can see on many days outside your window or wherever you might be. This is probably one of Caravaggio's most dramatic compositions. Drama is kind of his second name, as his second name, yes. But this commission, which is called both the Entombment of Christ and the Deposition, so take your pick, was asked of him even before the Contarelli canvases were commissioned from him. But he took a while to get to the point where he could work on this composition, so it dates a little bit later. It was created for the Church of Chiesa Nuova, which means the new church. And the composition shows Nicodemus, John the Evangelist, and the Virgin, Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the wife of Cleophas. Now, Nicodemus and John the Evangelist are in the process of lowering Christ's body into his tomb. And then you see above Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, who is exclaiming rather vividly with her raised hands and expressive face. Now here, and we haven't seen this, I don't believe, we have an idealized image of Christ, both his face and his physique. Caravaggio is showing us here that he's learned some other lessons from painters and maybe also sculptors, as you'll see here in Rome, as he's created this dynamic pyramidal composition. I've seen it a number of times, and it just knocks me out every time I do. It's very large. The figures are not life-size, but they are large enough to make an enormous impression on one. Now, let's see. He may have known this fragment of the Meleago sarcophagus. Artists were involved at this time, and certainly long before Caravaggio, searching out antique examples of works of art that could help them, inspire them in their own endeavors. And scholars think that maybe Caravaggio knew this detail. It's not unlike how he painted the figure of Christ, for instance. And then certainly he knew this painting by Raphael. And again, the figure of Christ is quite similarly arranged, as it were. And here, of course, you have a smaller group in Caravaggio, but a group of people who are mourning his death and taking him here, not to a tomb in the ground, but to a rock-cut tomb that you see in the left-hand corner. However, no one will disavow this relationship between the Christ figure and the Christ of Michelangelo's Pietà. A little differently arranged, but very similar. For instance, that right arm that hangs limply Now, here's another chapel that Caravaggio was asked to grace, but with one single painting, the Madonna of Loreto. See how we're doing here, okay. It was commissioned by a woman who had been recently widowed. She was a noblewoman. Her name was Orsini di Rossi. And her husband had recently died, and she commissioned this work from Caravaggio because of her husband and because this chapel was going to be dedicated to him. And the deceased's devotion in particular was to the Madonna of Loreto. Now, again, you may know this story, but it has been told that there is a house in Loreto. I know some people I know have seen it. And it was carried there, it belonged to the Virgin, it was carried there by angels. And that's where the name comes, the Madonna di Loreto. So let's look at this a little more closely. But what Caravaggio does not do here, interestingly enough, is he does not represent very much of the house itself. A doorway, a step. Oh, we see a little bit of the brick. Is that plaster that's fallen away? And a rather stately, but carefully, what will you say? Non-committal virgin, no expression on her face, welcoming these pilgrims, these people coming to worship her at her displaced house, I guess you could call it. It's not unusual for Caravaggio to hone down a story or a Bible verse, as we've seen. What is quite unusual, again, however, is the representation of these two souls who clearly are poor, they're dirty, they're not very good looking. They are Caravaggio's people. So one hopes that the widow was very pleased, but clearly the canvas has stayed in place all these years, so she must have been. Okay. This John the Baptist was executed for a banker. Caravaggio, as he remained in Rome, was sought after by many, as you probably have gotten the impression. Here, he emphasizes, however, in this representation of John the Baptist, the sorrowing of this soul against this very dark background. The only real color here, there's a little bit of gold, maybe a tiny bit of dark green in the leaves, but the only real color here is the red of his robe. And this is represented as, the red of sacrifice. He holds a staff in his hand. And if you look closely, it actually is a cross. At the top, in perspective, is a small bar that designates this staff as a cross. So it speaks in a very quiet way of his sacrifice and also that of Christ whom he served. Saint Jerome, as one of my sources tells us, is represented just as he should be, And this painting was executed for Cardinal Scipione Borghese. And the thought is, however, that Caravaggio gave this painting to the cardinal to help get him out of trouble, as he had attacked a notary. We don't know why. Now, this is, what's the date here? 1605. More of this activity on Caravaggio's part will come into view, as it were, in a few minutes. But I opened with saying he represents Jerome just as he should be. He's translating the Bible into Latin. And the study that he's using, you could say, at least his table is in disarray, 3 different books and a skull, speaking of life and death, I suppose. But it's another composition of Caravaggio's where he's pushed the protagonist up to the picture plane, and it should remind you of some of his older paintings, like the card sharps, for instance. And you see nothing of a setting, but a dark background, and it looks almost black, which, as we'll see, is not unusual for Caravaggio. The Madonna and Child was St. Anne, with a nickname that's hard to pronounce. Palafrenieri was created for an important chapel, Chapel of St. Anne, in St. Peter's. However, literally, as we're told, a week after the canvas was delivered, it was rejected. It was moved by porters, which took us to a nearby church of Palafrenieri, dedicated to St. Anne. And we're not quite sure why, what happened. But it's thought that one thing may have caused people to be a little uncomfortable. Look at the Virgin, and to the extent that her breasts are seeming to pour over her dress, or at least they're quite emphasized. Have you ever seen a Madonna represented in this way? No. She's helping the youngster, her son, step on the serpent, of course, which means that they're destroying what are they destroying? Evil. And what the evil is, by the way, is Protestantism. This painting was created prospectively to say that there was nothing more important than the Catholic Church and what the Catholic Church stood for. Now, there's St. Anne to the right, who's somewhat divided from the Madonna and her child. And this apparently was something that the original people who commissioned the painting didn't like as well. The Madonna, by the way, was painted after a model that Caravaggio quite liked. Her name was Lena, and she was a prostitute. The Death of the Virgin, was one of Caravaggio's largest paintings. And it was commissioned by Carmelite fathers for their church in Trastevere. And again, this was a composition that took him a while to actually complete after it was commissioned of him in 1601. But it was rejected because there was a rumor that the model for the Virgin was that same prostitute, Lena. And let me read something to you from someone who was living at the time, someone who wrote about such works. His name is Mancini. The death of the Virgin for the Scala was removed from the aforesaid church by the fathers because he had depicted a courtesan as the Madonna, a certain filthy whore whom he loved, lascivious and overdressed. And while another contemporary writes, he had depicted the Madonna lacking in decorum, swollen, and with her legs bared. You can see her legs sticking out from the end of her red dress. However, in Caravaggio's defense, given a couple of things that were just said, apparently a swollen belly alludes to grace. I never knew that. And the youthful aspect of the Virgin, and she's really quite beautiful, don't you think? To eternity, and the red cloth that she wears to resurrection, to triumph. Quite the monumental work. Now, a little history is in order here. So bear with me. And I'll have to go rather quickly through the rest of the slides. Sunday, May 28th, 1606, marked the first anniversary of the coronation of Pope Paul V. However, something else important happened on that day. Caravaggio, with a group of friends, and another fellow, Ranuccio Tomasoni, with his group of friends, more like a mob, as we understand, were watching a tennis match, and they had a bet on. And Tomasoni lost and had to pay Caravaggio. It was 10 scudi. It's something like, in today's money, I looked it up, it's like 30 cents. But anyway, they got into a fight, and Tomasoni clubbed Caravaggio in the head, hurting him quite badly. And Caravaggio responded by slicing into his leg with his sword and causing Tomasoni's demise. And Caravaggio subsequently was issued a death warrant, but in the meantime, he'd hidden at a friend's house, and he had escaped the following Wednesday after he was able, with his head wound, to move. And where he went, first of all, was to Naples, and then to Malta, and then Sicily, back to Naples, and then he died on the Italian coast. So if you're not very good with geography, here we are, Rome, Naples. This next one will help us a little bit more. Sicily is at the toe of the Italian boot, and near the top of Sicily, near the boot, is Messina, and then about 3/4 of the way, 2/3 of the way down is Syracuse, places where Caravaggio will find himself. He created this work, which is quite stunning. his first work in Naples. And meanwhile, when he found himself in these foreign places, he was very welcomed because his significance as an artist had followed him. And so he received numerous commissions. And this was his first. And Seven Works of Mercy, it derives from a passage in Matthew. And I'll just read this very quickly. For when I was hungry, you gave me food. When thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was a stranger, you took me into your home. When naked, you clothed me. When I was ill, you came to my help. When in prison, you visited me. Now, there's a fellow being fed on the left, a fellow being protected by someone with a knife, also on the left. There is someone, as you can see, his feet very like the Magdalene's. I mean about the Virgin's feet being buried. And then there is, oh, sorry, I thought I had a detail of her. And then there's the woman on the right who is feeding her father, who looks like he might be in jail. And she looks like she's having a very, and may I say, distasteful time doing so, but she's generous with herself, helping her father, and so forth. So here is a composition which is very unlike, as I understand, any other works representing these seven works of mercy, which other artists divided out into several different canvases or frescoes, what have you. This crucifixion of St. Andrew was created for, let me see, also in Naples for a viceroy of the city. And here is a composition that's a little puzzling. If you don't know the story, which I didn't initially, it looks like the figure on the left is trying to untie St. Andrew. In fact, he's tying him more securely to the cross. St. Andrew preached, and his preaching was not appreciated. And therefore, he was strung up on the cross, and he remained alive for 2 days, preaching from where he was. And then, as a crowd crowded around him and shouted for his release, he said he did not want to be released, but he wanted to be crucified and die as did Christ. So you're looking at part of the crowd at in the right hand corner and at the left hand corner with this woman with a terrible goitered neck. I understand that was common in Naples. I don't know. Flagellation of Christ is another work which was executed in Naples. And here, once again, you have a very few figures and a dark, really black background, which is the nature of Caravaggio's compositions. As I have just a few more to show you, and I'll be rather quick about it. But this is another work which was basically based upon a Michelangelo design. However, it seems that Caravaggio knew it through Sebastiano del Piombo's design for the flagellation, which was based on Michelangelo's original design. And this subject of the beheading of the Baptist became a favorite of Caravaggio's, and art historians can only speculate it was because of his frame of mind. Things were not getting any easier for him in exile by any means. And here's another such, which places small figures, let me see, against a very large and handsome masonry arch. And let me see, the canvas is something like 9 feet high by maybe 12 feet across, and the figures in it are life size. And you see two figures peering out of, we don't know what it is, a jail cell, but he's already, the Baptist is already dead, and which is unusual in that he's going to have his head sliced off now, but usually we see the head sliced off and not the before. With Salome with the plate to carry his head. This is another work that he created while he was in Naples. We don't know too much about it, but we can examine it from the point of view of Caravaggio's sense of his self and his life as a pretty miserable looking Cupid against a black background. And then the burial of St. Lucy finds him in Syracuse, as the caption tells us. And it's very like the beheading of the Baptist in terms of the setting. Now, this was created for a place. I understand that it was a kind of mausoleum where Lucy actually was once upon a time buried, but her body, her remains, no longer there. And what Caravaggio has done here is he has created a kind of, let's see, I have my notes here, kind of what? A kind of grotto or large grotto-like entity there on the left. You can see that it's in shadow. And these natural grottos, although this does not look at all natural, but architectural, abounded in Syracuse, apparently, and she was buried in one of those. So he gives emphasis to that, very little emphasis to the people, but to her body, of course, which is important, up against the picture plane. And a similar work is The Raising of Lazarus, which he created in Messina, so also in Sicily. In terms of the dark background, the architecture really taking over what we can see of it. And the figures, although quite a number of them, none of them terribly, I don't know, recognizable. You see Christ to the left, though, but he's in shadow, just a little bit of light on his shoulder. This is Caravaggio at the end of his life. And again, this canvas in Messina. Here, in terms of colors of the rainbow, all we have is red. Otherwise, we have browns, golds, and blacks. I suppose gold is a color. And two portraits of the same person. I didn't want to leave you with the impression that Caravaggio was not sought after as a portraitist, because most important painters were, but he painted very few. I think you could count on one hand how many he did execute. And this is of his friend Maffeo Barberini, and it's a realistic portrait, but there's not a lot of personality that we see here. And I put it that way because a little later portrait of the same person I think tells you much more about the authority that this person had. His eyes, the turn of his head, the gesture of his right arm and hand. And then finally, this we think is the last painting that Caravaggio executed. And David, again, silhouetted against a black background, holds the head of Goliath, which everyone says is a self-portrait of the artist. And you can compare it to the self-portrait from the martyrdom of St. Matthew. And you might wonder that perhaps this is how Caravaggio was feeling at that time. Now, a little more history, and then I'm called a night. A friend of Caravaggio's, this Ferdinando Gonzaga of Mantua, who became a cardinal in 1607, went to Rome in 1610 to solicit a pardon for Caravaggio from Pope Paul V, and it was indeed forthcoming. So in hope that it would be, Caravaggio set sail from Naples. He's now in Naples for the second time in 1610. And as this tells us, to be safe, he landed at the Spanish bastion of Port Ercole on the southern border of Tuscany. And there the final scene of his tragedy was played out. He was mistaken for somebody else. He was captured, put into prison. And when he was released, his boat with all his belongings was no longer there, and he could not find it. Although he wandered on the beach, as we understand it, looking for it, trying to catch sight of the vessel that had his belongings. But finally, no luck, he came to a place where he was put to bed with a raging fever. And as this source says, without the aid of God or man, in a few days he died, as miserably as he has lived. So thank you very much. Quite the individual, I think.
Yeah, he's amazing. Does anybody have any questions or comments that you want to share? We have a couple minutes that we can do that if you'd like. You can put them, you can unmute yourselves, or you can put them in chat and I'll relay those messages. Everybody's stunned in silence.
Well, it's a lot. I knew it would be a lot. It's a lot to take in, all those later paintings in particular.
I love that, the last painting that you had of Goliath. I never would have realized that that was the face. That, I mean, it's obviously, I mean, it looks so much like Caravaggio. It has to be him, but that's amazing.
Yeah.
I have a question that's maybe non-art historical. When you were talking about one of the Caravaggio, the conversions of St. Peter, you said, I have to know this because I'm your nephew. You said it reminds you of the Bob Dylan tune, but you didn't tell us what tune it was.
Oh.
So I don't know. Could you share that? Because I thought that would be a very interesting insight to my.
Okay, I won't sing it. God said to Abraham, "Kill me a son."
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Abe had said, "Hey," Abe had says, "Where do you want this done?" And there's a little bit more, and it's out on Route 61.
Nice. Here's a real question, though. A couple of the paintings, I noticed that I think Caravaggio sort of elongated certain parts of, especially women's figures. And I noticed necks and arms being, like, if you were to try to put that into scale, they would be uncommonly long. That's at least my impression. Any truth to that guess?
I didn't read anything of that sort,
I
Jeffrey,
think
but
that's that image is the one I was thinking.
that's the one you're thinking of?
There's a couple other ones when the figure is laying its head out, stretched, and it looks. I didn't know if it was
How about
that's
her?
the other one. That looks like that she's a giraffe.
Well, no, you're right. I didn't notice that, Jeffrey, but you're right. No,
Hmm.
he's not known for his anatomical correctness. You're absolutely right. That's something that one of my sources was quite adamant about. Yeah.
Hmm.
Good.
Thank you, Auntie.
So I'm trying, oh, just a second. I had it at chat up and then there we go. Anne said another amazing presentation, Ellen. You make it all come to life, come so
Well,
alive. Thank
thank
you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's fun doing. Okay.
All right. Oh, we got one more
Oh,
comment. Just a
okay.
second. Trying to get to it. Oh, maybe I don't. Okay. Nope, I think I've got that one. All right.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. If you want to watch this again or share this with anybody, it will be posted on the Peter White Public Library YouTube page probably in the next day or so. But I will let you know that Ellen's next presentation for us is going to be in September, September 16th at 6:30 p.m. And we are under negotiation as to what artist and art we are going to be talking about. We've thrown out Bernini, possibly, or Hopper. So we will see what happens.
Any votes?
Any votes? Who would you like to hear about? Oh,
Or somebody else?
someone said Hopper. I see
Oh,
I
okay.
see a
I
Hopper
know
in
who
there.
that is.
Yep. Yep. I think we only see Hopper there. So we got one vote for Hopper. So it depends on how. Oh, we got a Bernini. So now we're tied. Um, oh, it says cheers to all. Didn't you do Hopper already?
Maybe I did. See, I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Oh,
think
you did?
I
You
did,
know
I
what?
did.
That was one
Yeah.
of
I
your
did,
first
Meg.
ones.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
You did Hopper, and I know you did Andrew Wyeth too, I
yeah,
think.
I did. Yeah, I
So,
did. I
yep.
did that. Yeah.
But someone is saying more Hopper. So there you go. Maybe we need a Hopper part 2. I don't know.
And another
Uh,
Bernini.
And another Bernini. So there you go. Well, you know what? Ellen,
you.
John, and I will get together over beers, and who knows, we might come, oh, sorry, over dinner and talk about who we're going to who we're going to talk about next anyway. But thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate everybody that shows up for presentations. Because that makes my job worth it. So I appreciate you all, and I especially appreciate Ellen for putting so much time and effort into these presentations and making them so wonderful.
Well,
So
thank you very much. And thank you to all of you who have come, and love seeing your faces.
yes. All right. Well, everybody, have a great rest of your night. And hopefully if you're in Marquette, come on down and see the Bluegrass concert tomorrow night. So, all right. We'll see you guys later.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.